Jack is dead, my friend. You can call me Joker.
The Joker is the greatest supervillain ever created.
I would argue that he is the greatest trickster figure in any mythology and any kind of fiction.
I was a fan of the comic books, and particularly of Batman, and particularly of the Joker.
There'll never be one like you.
I think that the Joker is probably better known than the Devil.
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
See you in hell.
Capone, Dillinger, Machine Gun Kelly, the gangsters of the 1920s and 30s, captured headlines and the public's imagination. And many comic books reflected that fascination.
The stories up until that time in the comics and the villains were mostly small-time crooks, gangsters, bootleggers, bank robbers.
But the violence and terror on America's streets had many longing for a solution. In 1939, Bob Kane and Bill Finger answered the call with a costumed crime fighter, the Batman, a benevolent force for justice and order.
I thought the name was good. It's a good name, Batman. And I loved the idea that when I saw the drawings of him, he looked like a very mysterious figure with that cape.
But who could test the Batman? Your average thug, gangster, or crime lord was no match for the caped crusader with a debonair presence, ironclad logic, and arsenal of gadgets. Kane and Finger and 17-year-old Jerry Robinson conjured up an opposing force to the Dark Knight, one of mayhem, destruction, and chaos.
Biblical times, David and Goliath, to Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, and everything in between. So I wanted to create a character who was worthy of the hero. I thought the stronger the villain, the stronger the hero. I have to have a name, and the Joker rang into mind because the cards were a big part of my family.
He is inspired by the old silent film, The Man Who Laughs. It is that carnival mask of a clown that hides the horror lurking just below the surface. And to have him pitted against the good guy who is in the mask of a horrific, nightmarish bat, it's an interesting reversal.
The Joker first appeared in April 1940 in Batman #1 as a remorseless and colorful killer. Finger intended to kill off the character in just his second appearance, but found himself overruled when the staff at DC Comics saw the potential of the nasty clown. A hastily drawn panel was added to the last page of the story, indicating that the Joker had survived to wreak havoc another day.
Makes him a great antagonist for Batman because Batman is logical and scientific, not the Joker.
The Joker is the horrific version of what Batman is to ordinary people. Whereas Batman scares criminals, Joker scares and horrifies the ordinary people.
He's very iconic. He's an archetype. He's so defined in our minds. You know, the Joker is the best known villain in Western fiction.
The Joker became beloved to readers through the 1940s and 50s. The simple contrast of a clownish crime boss committing deadly pranks created a fascinating duality that magnetized comic readers. But there was also growing public concern over the intense and horrific content sometimes featured in comic books.
In the 1950s, you have a censorship movement which leads to the Comics Code Authority, which has a draconian restriction on what content could be in comic books, which really is why all characters in the 1950s get goofy and weird.
Joker was always a murderous, psychotic clown in the comics, but they were always able to kind of soft pedal it so that it would still be approved by the comic book code. Even though he would kill people, it was still very jokey.
As a result, a lot of the writers and artists of the era claim they felt very restricted creatively in terms of what they could do. And a lot of people see the 50s as kind of a bland era for comic books.
Still reeling from the effects of the Comic Code Authority, the tumultuous 1960s further impact the Joker's evolution into insanity.
Kennedy was dead. The Vietnam War was on. There was a civil rights movement. We had an Iron Curtain. We had survived just barely a Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a dark time in a lot of ways for America. There was an urgent need for heroes.
What is it, Commissioner?
How soon can you get here?
Quick as a flash, Commissioner.
Batman shows up at this time in primary colors.
It's Batman!
Stand and fight, Joker!
We were able to take all of that and kind of weave it into the show. Mayor Lindsay of New York became Mayor Lindsay in our show, just a little example.
But there was definitely a questioning of authority. Batman was the square. The villains were often seemed cooler. And I think the villains represented the counterculture.
Originally imagined as a hip but serious adventure show, 1966's Batman television show became a pop art, campy comedy under producer William Dozier. Cesar Romero's playful, prank-loving Joker stole the show.
We have 2 more jewels for our collection, my comic cronies. Batman and Robin, the dashing diamonds of daring do.
Unfamiliar with the Batman comic books, Romero was convinced to play the Joker after watching Frank Gorshin's turn as the Riddler.
Hold it, Riddler. For I, the clown prince of crime, have found the answer to it.
What is it, Joker?
My own utility belt.
Romero loved the part, saying he could do everything he'd been told not to do, get as hammy as he liked, and go all out.
Oh, dear me. The court jester must run just in time. Well, goodbye, kiddies.
I think it lost some of its luster. You know, the joke was over after 2 or 3 years. I think the public started to get a little bored with it.
I mean, I went through a period where I didn't like the Adam West show. I mean, a lot of people from my generation will tell you that. They loved it as a kid, and they got older and they started taking comics seriously. They go, oh no, that show's silly or it's campy or whatever. And so you'd kind of like shun it. You know, it's like, oh, that was when I was a kid. And then later on, you kind of go, oh no, you watch it again, you go, no, it actually really is dang cool.
You know, they're calling me the $1 billion Batman only because we kicked off all of this stuff.
For a long time, people in comic books really had a big chip on their shoulders. They hated any sort of press they got where headline was pow, biff, wham, because that was what reporters constantly went back to. People within the industry really wanted comics to be given more respect for the art form.
As culture took a turn for the revolutionary in the late 60s, fans clamored for grounded stories with real stakes, and the Joker returned to his homicidal ways.
They'd been gradually getting a little bit more sophisticated. You know, there was the comic book fans from like the 50s and 60s and even the 70s had all grown up. They've kind of brought their comics with them.
Denny O'Neil as the writer, Neil Adams as artist, helped introduce the world back to the original dark and serious Batman. That was great in the 70s, and that did help open the door to older readers.
The artist Neil Adams and I were the new kids on the block. We were sort of the flavor of the week. What we did was try and put some psychological validity into the character.
In 1973's The Joker's Five-Way Revenge, from Batman number 251, artist Neil Adams drew the character taller and leaner, extending his jaw to give his face a distinctive, haunting look. And writer Denny O'Neil introduced the idea that the Joker was truly insane. Fans responded to this newer, darker Joker, and he became the first villain to feature as the title character in a comic book series.
We undid 15, 20 years of lousy comics. DC became the company that brought new artists. So you got a tremendous amount of experimenting.
DC went on to release a series of comics emphasizing the Joker's insanity, a decision that would define the character for decades. This maniacal psychology is no better explored than in the 1-2 punch of Frank Miller's Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, and writer Alan Moore and artist Brian Bowling's graphic novel, Batman, The Killing Joke.
And between 1979 and 82, I didn't look at any comics at all.
You know, I was betting that they wouldn't survive another 10 years.
It left the way for people like me, Alan Moore, to play to that audience, to do stories that were beyond the understanding of an 8-year-old.
Frank Miller had been doing some really interesting stuff over at Marvel with Daredevil.
He was absolutely pushing the envelope. I thought we need an injection of that at DC.
Jeanette was a captivating conversationalist. They were willing to take a chance on giving me complete freedom. Later, Dick Giordano, God rest him, approached me and he said, do you want to take a crack at Batman? Batman struck me as one of the icons. And I thought, what can I offer? What can I possibly offer that Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams didn't already do? So much of writing heroic fiction involves defining the hero through other people. And Batman is best described by his villains.
I just loved taking the Joker to such an extreme place. It's to Frank's credit and his writing that we were able to do that. There's no doubt he's not a clown, he's crazy. He's nuts. He's a psychopath. And that really is a lot different than the Joker that had been portrayed prior to Dark Knight.
The Joker is a demon, but he has no reason to exist without there being a Batman. And so as soon as Batman appears, the Joker reawakens like Lazarus.
He was the first to say that the Joker was dependent on Batman.
1986's Batman: The Dark Knight Returns added multiple layers to Batman and the Joker and changed the comic book industry forever. But Batman: The Killing Joke in 1988 showed us how deep the Joker's depravity could go.
Killing Joke is such a nice, straightforward story. It's, in my mind, one of the most brilliant stories there's been told in mainstream superhero comics.
It is a very simple Batman and a Joker story, but it tells you all the information you need. It gives you all the pieces. So if you've never read a Batman comic, you could read this and completely understand who everybody is and how they all fit together.
I was 16 years old when The Killing Joke came out, and it's shocking. You know, you're used to reading things where people are like, we're gonna take over the world. And then you read something like that where Gordon's watching these pictures of his daughter lying on the ground with like a gunshot in her spine.
It's basically a horror story.
Joker, for the most part, was a well-liked character because of the flamboyance of the character. He's still violent, he's still deadly, but it was more about the gags and the stunts than it was about the psychological terror he inflicted. This is psychological terror more so than worrying about a hand buzzer that might electrocute you.
The Killing Joke was the first time that anybody really started taking him deadly serious.
Instead of a guy dressed up as a bat fighting a guy dressed up as a clown, we have two people who are fighting philosophical arguments, and that might actually say something broader than just the fight on the page. That writing at multiple levels hadn't been seen in comic books before.
Brian Bolland's art is so realistic, and it's representational of real life. They look like real people in real settings.
Brian Bolland is such a great and emotive artist that you see the pain on Jim Gordon's face. The horror on his face is made really clear.
I wanted it to be about the Joker because he was such a fascinating character. But Batman, if anything, is more of a shadowy. He almost works best when he's a two-dimensional character.
It's epic. It's Joker's magnum opus.
The Joker stories of the 1980s set the stage for a terrifying new version of the character. A Joker that would twist the theatrical, colorful elements of the 1950s and 60s with the violence and insanity of the 1970s and 80s.
Jack Nicholson as the Joker, you didn't have to be a casting director, and that was just everybody's first choice. He's almost too perfect, but he's so great that he even transcends that. You know, he even goes beyond your expectations just because he's so good.
Tim's idea about this movie was about identity. Here's a man plunged into nuclear waste, comes out this other identity. So my simple thought on it is the guy is from then on short-wired.
I have given a name to my pain. It is Batman. Appear and disappear at will.
I love that. This would be the character whose core, while totally determinant of the part, was the least limiting of any I would ever encounter.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
This is a more literary way of approaching than I might have had as a kid when I read the comics, but, you know, you have to get specific.
I'm of a mind, make some mookie.
In a way, his specifics broadened it rather than what you normally use specifics for, is so you don't drift. His specifics are he's not wired up the same way.
Freak. Terrorizes. Wait till they get a load of me.
Even in my own life, people have said, there's nothing sacred to you with the area of humor, Jack. You'll trample on it. You know, sometimes, Jack, relax with the humor.
Oh, I got a live one here.
This does not apply to the Joker. In fact, just the opposite. Things that people, even the wildest comics, might be afraid to find funny. Not this character.
Could somebody tell me what kind of a world we live in where a man dressed up as a bat gets all of my press? This town needs an enema.
I remember hearing things like, oh, you know, in the first movie, the Joker stole the show.
What are you laughing at?
Reflecting on the movie, I'm kind of a contrarian, so as I said, nobody took this movie. They don't today. It's one of my best performances.
You idiot! You made me. Remember, you dropped me into that vat of chemicals. That wasn't easy to get over. And don't think that I didn't try.
Batman was now mainstream. Gotham City was brought to younger audiences in 1992, when Batman, the animated series, debuted on Fox Kids. The series would introduce a Joker that, through the nuanced and multifaceted performance of Mark Hamill, for many younger viewers, became the definitive depiction. Though the show embraced the darker aesthetic and more mature themes of the 1989 Batman movie, it had to be careful about what appeared on screen.
You know, the Joker in the comic books is killer, and the Joker in our show could not kill because it was a children's television show.
The one and only Joker!
As soon as we heard Mark's audition, we all said, this is it. I've always heard in the comic books, Mark's voice, strangely enough. I mean, I've always imagined this high-pitched voice and this high-pitched laughter, and Mark had it.
One of the things that informs the Joker is his laugh. I remember reading the comic books, it was ha 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 ha, but lots of ho ho hee hee ho ho. His laugh should be like a musical instrument. It should sort of illustrate his mood. Everybody's sitting down at their little music stand, and I just thought to energize the character, to shake my fist, and I felt I've got to stand up.
What? Compare me to Batman?
You could actually videotape Mark Hamill recording the voice and use some of that for the animation. He is so articulate in his physical acting.
We struck a nice balance between the clown and the killer and really made him kind of a scary character.
In 2005, filmmaker Christopher Nolan elevated the comic book film with his genre-defying Batman Begins.
What the hell are you? I'm Batman.
The gritty, realistic Batman of this Gotham City called for a villain who could challenge him in a way no one else could. From the outset, the choice was clear.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
We knew we wanted to address the Joker, the concept of escalation outlined at the end of the first film.
You see, this is how crazy Batman's made Gotham.
It had to be a Joker that fits into the Chris Nolan version of Gotham City. And so it had to be a Joker that was less campy and a little bit more realistic and ultimately more terrifying, I think.
I'm a man of my word.
And to me, it was creating a sort of psychologically credible anarchist, a force of anarchy, a force of chaos.
a purposeless criminal, a psychopath. To me, that is the most frightening form of evil.
Nothing in his pockets but knives and lint. No matches on prints, DNA, dental.
The enemy who has no rules, the enemy who's not out for anything, who can't be understood, can only be fought.
All you care about is money. This town, it deserves a better class of criminal. And I'm gonna give it to him.
Hi. You're somebody without any rules whatsoever.
I'm an agent of chaos.
Somebody whose motive is just pure destruction.
There's no way to anticipate what he will or won't do because it's based on no ethics and no morality.
Come here.
So it's kind of random, thoughtless violence.
2008's The Dark Knight, and Heath Ledger's Oscar-winning performance as the Joker shattered audiences' expectations.
Why so serious?
Heath did a fantastic job with it. You know, it's this completely anarchic and destructive, violent, punk, just abnormal being who has just embraced everything that most people attempt to rid themselves of in their lives and lives purely for that. And he finds in Batman a very worthy opponent. And in a strange way, I think that there's an absolute disgust from Batman and a hatred of this man, but also a recognition that this is another character like himself who will not compromise whatsoever, just absolutely refuses to do so. So a very bizarre kind of a respect at the same time.
Without Batman, I'm not sure that the Joker would exist in the way that he does in our movie.
Then why do you want to kill me? I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? No, you complete me.
The Joker wants to see that everybody has a price, that nobody is pure, and that even Batman can be bought or can be leveraged in such a way that he would compromise his principles.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful, unethical, dangerous.
I think it's really a question of the Joker being the answer to Batman, in a sense. Batman, he's got rules and things he will and won't do. He's got systems that he orders his behavior by to try and restrain his natural instinct for violence or for revenge or whatever is driving him, the dark impulses that drive him. The Joker is the natural villain to this because he upsets people's rules, he dismantles them, he uses people's rules against them, and so I think there's a very natural tension between them, a very natural opposition.
You're just too much fun. I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
The Dark Knight opened the door for Joker mania. Fans couldn't get enough of the character. And in the late 2000s to mid-2010s, he appeared in over 20 movies, TV shows, and video games. Always the twisted thorn in Batman's side. The Arkham video games and Batman Under the Red Hood demonstrated different takes on the character, each with its own emphasis on the many complex aspects of the Joker's personality.
It's like putting on an old pair of running shoes or your lucky pair of jeans. Once you get into his mind, it's really welcoming. I mean, it's liberating in a way, because he gets to do so many things that I can't do in civilized society. I mean, I love his ego, I love his humor, his theatricality. You know, I really enjoy him in ways I can't say.
Playing a psychopathic crime boss and homicidal lover opposite Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Jared Leto would bring his own unique interpretation to the Joker when he joined the cast of David Ayer's Suicide Squad.
He came on set, and to shoot him for the first time, you could feel the entire crew. Everybody knew they were seeing something special. Everybody knew they were witnessing an important birth.
Oh, I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just gonna hurt you. Really, really bad.
The Joker to me is Hamlet.
Joker is one of those rare opportunities you get to reinterpret, bring back to life some character that provides some counterpoint to the good of the world.
Where is she?
You don't know whether Harley's gonna like laugh, hug you, or like shoot you in the face, and then Joker's like even worse than that.
I could tell you meant that.
The trick was to be incredibly respectful, yet at the same time, reinvent the Joker. Jared pulled that off.
Audiences were in for a laugh just a few months later when comedian Zach Galifianakis voiced the clown prince of crime in 2017's The Lego Batman movie, bringing his own brand of humor to the role and new meaning to the words, "You complete me."
Let me tell you something, Jay Bird. Batman doesn't do ships.
What?
As in relationships. There is no us.
I think we kind of all came to it together, this sensitivity of the Joker and Batman, actually, to, men don't ever talk about friendships. Men don't talk a lot. So to force this kind of almost therapeutic.
I don't believe I would be Superman without fighting Zod.
See? Superman gets it. Why can't Batman?
It's almost like get a room already. And that's what we did. What are you talking about?
I'm off the menu. You won't get to fight any of this anymore.
Man, am I sorry I asked.
We were interested in as if Batman and Joker had found a friendship therapist, as if they were working out the problems. Jealousy, from Joker's point of view, is everything.
Admit it. I'm your greatest enemy. You're not my greatest enemy, Joker.
They do depend on each other.
Yes.
And what would happen if they both took a step back and understood that to be the situation?
I hate you.
Oh, that's nice.
Me too.
Joker is in a way like Batman's black sheep brother. They have a real relationship. He wants somebody to tell him that, they appreciate him.
I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I hate you, Joker.
I hate you too.
I hate you more.
I hate you the most.
I hate you forever.
The Joker had been taken in brave new directions and pushed to limits not yet explored. But there was still room to push the character even further. In 2019, filmmaker Todd Phillips reimagined the Joker from a totally new perspective in an R-rated, stripped-down, and serious character study.
I had never really thought about doing a comic book movie. For me, it was more about this idea of doing a film, but about somebody people have no idea who, what, where he came from. It was really, how do you make a great character study and get people to want to see it?
Is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?
I remember Todd sent me a drawing of Joker in the subway, and it looked just like Joaquin Phoenix. He said, yeah, I just can't get him out of my head. And this is years ago.
With Joker, I just liked his sense of mayhem and chaos. It was something that was just attractive to me as a character. It's fun to say what made him like that, and that's ultimately really what the goal of the movie. It's not this gigantic statement on the world today. There is stuff thematically in there, but really it's like, what makes somebody that way?
It's a wonderful exploration to take probably the most famous villain who we've watched just wreak havoc in so many forms. What happens if we humanize this person?
We talked a lot about who would he be and why is he like this and where's that laugh come from and why does he wear makeup. We started reading a lot about narcissism and ego and things that we think that are baked into our version of Joker. Joker's a narcissist, but he's an egoless narcissist. The ego is the thing that's trying to control this wild horse.
Joaquin Phoenix would later win an Oscar for his mesmerizing physical portrayal of Arthur Fleck in Joker.
Every time I've ever written a movie, I always have to write it with an actor in mind. So I really specifically wrote for Joaquin Phoenix. What I like about Joaquin is his unpredictability. He's playing jazz while other people are doing math. He's just doing his own thing. And I feel like that's very much what we saw the character of Arthur/Joker as. And I just thought, boy, if we get him, we could really do something special.
What?
It's kind of otherworldly. It's unlike any other performance I've ever seen. He's so in his character from the get-go, and he's filled with wonderfully inspiring ideas.
For my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed, but I do. For me, when I work with a director, I just want somebody that has a singular vision and a really unique take on the material. And it was clear based on Todd's screenplay that he had a real sensitivity to the challenges that Arthur is going through.
And maybe to the chagrin of true comic book fans, we didn't see dropping Arthur Fleck into a vat of acid and turning him white. That wasn't the movie we're making.
I think part of his transformation is finding his voice, in a way, finding Joker. And I think prior to the emergence of Joker, he's struggling with what it is that he wants to say, how he wants to say it.
Joaquin's the most nimble actor I've ever worked with. He just doesn't get stuck in anything.
You take, Todd and Scott and pieces of me and Katharine Hepburn and Frankenfurter, and you put it all together, and that's our Joker. And I don't think that any of us really knew that that was going to be the ingredients.
There's many ways to look at the movie. He might not be Joker or Arthur. I mean, the one thing that, I remember from Killing Joke, when they asked about his past, and he says his past has always been multiple choice. And I think some people will come into this movie and this is just a version of a Joker origin. It's the version this guy is telling in this room at a mental institution. I don't know that he's the most reliable narrator in the world.
The twisted smile, the warped mind, the maniacal laugh. Whether he's a sadistic mobster, a laboratory worker, or a failed comic, the Joker has terrorized Gotham City, battled Batman, and captivated audiences for the past 80 years. And he will continue to torment and entertain us for years to come. He is the greatest supervillain of all time.
Every kid loves this guy, I believe. And I particularly love just the name, Joker. It's fantastic.
He has stood the test of time, and there will always be a Joker.
The Joker is a great villain. He is the quintessential villain of our age.
I think he's one of the most well-known villains in the world.
It is flattering that people have accepted my Joker as much as they have. And I have to tell you, I've listened to them all. From Larry Storch, Frank Welker, one of my voiceover idols, Lenny Weinrib, Cesar Romero, Brent Spiner, and Michael Emerson, Kevin Michael Richardson, Jeff Bennett, and all of the modern-day Jokers. Every version, to me, has validity. There's no definitive Joker. He will be reinterpreted long after I'm gone because he's just such a great character.
Here's to crime.
Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
I just love bad guys. It's fun to say, well, why is he like that? What made him like that? And that's ultimately really what the goal of the movie. It's not this gigantic statement on the world today, and there is stuff thematically in there, but really it's like, what makes somebody that way? And the Joker, I just liked his sense of mayhem and chaos.
Todd called me and he said, I have this crazy idea for this sort of alternate version of DC, and the first one is the origin story of Joker. I thought, this is just so bold.
this is exactly how I imagined it. Todd has a very unique way of looking at things. And nobody could have made this movie but Todd.
I have never really thought about doing a comic book movie. For me, it was more about this idea of doing a character study, but about somebody people have no idea who, what, where he came from or anything like that. So it kind of came at it that way. It wasn't like, oh, I want to make a Joker movie. It was really came from like, how do you make a great character study and get people to want to see it? Warner's was pretty loose with it. I pitched it to them as an idea first, and they just said, okay, go explore it. I met with some people at DC, and then we went off and wrote it. Scott Silver and I wrote for really a year and came back with the script, but there was no rules or mandates from them.
How's the comedy career? You famous stand-up yet?
We really departed from a lot of the comic book things. We made up a new character.
Arthur Fleck, y'all.
We gave him this name, and we chose it out of the blue, so to speak. And maybe to the chagrin of true comic book fans, we didn't see dropping Arthur Fleck into a vat of acid and turning him white. That wasn't the movie we're making. We just wanted to make something that felt grounded in a reality.
What's so funny? Freak!
It's a wonderful exploration to take probably the most famous two-dimensional villain who we've watched just wreak havoc in so many forms, whether it's the comic book, a television series, or various films, to say, okay, what happens if we humanize this person? And let's see what could be the possible causes.
We talked a lot about who would he be and why is he like this and what is his thing and where does that laugh come from and why does he wear makeup or not or da-da-da. And we really just started reading a lot about narcissism and ego and things that we think that are kind of baked into our version of Joker. Joker's a narcissist, but he's an egoless narcissist in our mind. You know, the ego is Arthur. The ego is the thing that's trying to control this wild horse that is Joker. But Joker is pure id. So we just thought, well, what happens when you go through your life wearing a mask, which a lot of people do. You're wearing a mask and you're pretending to be a certain way, and Arthur is very kind of controlled. But there are these glimpses of who he is underneath. And what happens when you take the mask off, which is kind of a weird flip because actually Joker wears a mask, but the idea, or makeup, but the idea is what happens when you stop living that life and live as the shadow. And then you just make the movie and you forget all that. And you just make the film and you hope it makes sense on some level. We purposely set the movie in the past to kind of remove it from anything else anybody knows. And it's not really even set in the past, it's sort of set in an alternate universe in a way. Even though we don't really say when and where the movie takes place, in my mind, it was always New York City, 1981. What did that look like and what did that feel like? From my memory of it, I mean, I was only 11 or 12 years old, but my memory of it was kind of what you see in the movie, a very kind of run-down, broken-down city on every level. And that was exciting to us as a place to put this character and a place to sort of explore. So that's the Gotham that we built. Mark Friedberg, our production designer, grew up on the Upper West Side his whole life. He remembers 1981 New York as a very specific time.
1981 is the year I left New York to go to college, and it was a rough place. It was dirty, dysfunctional. Every city agency was on strike at some point. The garbage was everywhere, and the city agencies that weren't on strike were corrupt. It was a time that it felt like the social contract was coming apart.
So when we introduce the city, which is a character in the movie, the city feels on the edge, like a powder keg.
New York is also a city of realms. And so I wanted there to be distinction between where Arthur goes to work, where Arthur goes to a comedy club, where Arthur goes to a hospital, what's in his neighborhood, what's out of his neighborhood. On some level, those are distinguished simply by the architecture of the city. On some level, they were distinguished by how we dealt with garbage. There was the garbage of the neighborhoods, the garbage of the municipal centers, the garbage of the wealthy neighborhoods, and each had actual design to it. So we did lay out a city. It's a city of bridges and islands. It relates to the Gotham of the comic books, and we tried to relate New York to it. So everything is a riff on something, and we were kind of unriffing it back into New York and then re-riffing it back into our version of Gotham. And in fact, we actually made a map. It helps us understand Arthur's trip why he gets on the bus, why he gets on the subway, where he lives relative to the places he travels to and where he goes. Where's Ha-Ha's? Where's Wayne Hall? Where are these places? And you may see it actually at the subway stations. We actually have a transit version of that map.
We shot all over the Bronx and Brooklyn, and we shot a little bit in Newark, New Jersey, bringing Gotham to life.
This film opens in what we call Gotham Square, which is clearly an analogy to Times Square, which was once the heartbeat of the city, and by the time of this story was the most nefarious neighborhood of the city. But we were challenged to try and find that city. We actually ended up having to go to Newark, which has been a blighted city, which is on the rebound. But there's a last little bit of it, right in the heart of it, that really tastes of the original New York with the scale, the architecture, and the grit. So that's where we chose to make our Gotham Square.
There's a concerted effort to try and get as much on camera as possible. Todd and Mark have tried to fill out the world around the actors so that they can actually see it. And where the camera can't reach, that's where VFX takes over.
It's hard. New York's been shot so much, but even when they were in a place that has been shot, we're making it look unique to our Gotham.
It's using New York City as Gotham, but you have to take away the things that are particularly iconic about New York City. And so we're swapping out some buildings and making things look dreary, weather-worn, tired. It's creating this background that you always feel but never look at.
The absolute best visual decision we made was where Arthur's neighborhood was. I set Arthur in Brownsville initially, which is the toughest of the tough of our neighborhoods here in New York. We put him in a quasi-project, not the straight-up projects that look the same everywhere, but a version of that, in a taller, bigger building where he would be more anonymous. We liked it, and we lived with it for a long time, but one thing bugged Todd about it, and it was the lack of topography, that it's flat. Todd's idea was to set Arthur in the South Bronx. Not the Fort Apache South Bronx, but the hilly South Bronx, one where he's trudging up public stairways and through alleys and in non-grid-like streets. And it confuses his world in a good way. So it added a real character to where Arthur lives and to our Gotham. People don't think of hills when they think of New York.
The world Todd created with Mark and everybody else was incredible. And the score, I have to say, is also indelible. The score is incredible. It almost feels like that's what you heard if you were walking down the streets of Gotham in 1981. You know, it's not apart from the film, it's part of it.
I started writing the music just after reading the script. So I just started playing the cello a bit, which is my main instrument, and just played around with some melodies and some feelings, and I kind of sat with it for a few hours, and then I was actually kind of just like practicing something else, and then I kind of stumbled onto what became the main theme afterwards. It was just like a really strong feeling of almost like something clicking into place, because it just connected with exactly the same feeling that I had when I read the script, and I was like, you know, so I caught my breath, and then I was just like, okay, and just started recording, and that's kind of where the main theme was born, out of this feeling. Like, this is how he feels, you know, this is what this feels like.
For my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do.
Every time I've ever written a movie, I always have to write it with an actor in mind. It really just helps fuel the writing. So I really specifically wrote for Joaquin Phoenix.
I remember Todd sent me a drawing of Joker in the subway, and it looked just like Joaquin Phoenix. He said, yeah, I just keep getting him, I can't get him out of my head. And this is years ago.
What I like about Joaquin is his unpredictability. He's playing jazz while other people are doing math. He's just doing his own thing. And I feel like that's very much what we saw the character of Arthur / Joker as. And I just thought, boy, if we get him, we could really do something special.
For me, when I work with a director, I just want somebody that has a singular vision and a really unique take on the material. And it was clear, based on Todd's screenplay, that he had a real sensitivity to the challenges that Arthur is going through. He felt things in a way that I hadn't expected.
Joaquin certainly had a ton of questions, and I think he also had the same thing I have, which is this fear. This is a big thing to take on. This isn't going to be a small little anonymous film. The Joker's been interpreted and done so many times over the years, and I think there hasn't been a bad one yet. So there's a certain fear. I love that fear. I kind of turned it into adrenaline, and you just go and make the movie, but I think a lot of it was just us talking through that stuff. And then I'm sure he had his own reservations about having never worked with me and all these other things. It just becomes a process of getting to know each other. And I think we spent a few months doing that before he said he would do it. Having spoken to many actors, I know nothing helps them more than wardrobe. Even like walking into Arthur's apartment for the first time for Joaquin, I don't think has the same effect as putting on the clothing. Putting on that skin, so to speak, helps actors that final step in.
When we first meet Arthur, he is very much John Q. Public, so to speak. Not much style, it's very practical. There's a vague young man aspect to it, but there's also vaguely an old man look to it, too. Where ultimately the Joker outfit comes from is something very organic.
The Joker look, which is so important to so many fans and people and so iconic in every version that the Joker's been out, you can imagine their, wardrobes. And we wanted to do something different but similar, and it's just a lot of discussions.
I love the fact that there was a suit written into the script.
The suit that he wears on stage at the comedy club is actually the same suit that he is as Joker, but we kind of subtly change the tone of the fabric and hope you don't really notice, but it's really always that same suit.
When we had our final fitting for the suit, it was all put together with the right shirt, with the right waistcoat, and the fit of it was kind of really dead on 70s, where it's a little longer line in the jacket. Joaquin was very excited about it, and he took on this different kind of slinky, sexy walk, which is just right for this guy at the end of the story.
We talked a lot about how skinny should Arthur be and how far do we want to go. And I kept saying to him, when are you going to start losing weight? Like, at what point do you start this? Because it was already like June, and he hadn't started, and we started shooting in September, and he's like 180 pounds, which he wasn't fat, but we're talking about getting to 125 pounds. And he goes, I got it. I go, well, we can hire a guy. I got this thing. This woman who's a nutritionist might want to. No, that's not how I do it. I go, how do you do it? He goes, I just stop eating and I starve myself. And he just ate an apple a day for the whole summer.
When I laid eyes on him at a table read, he had lost 50 pounds. He was a shell of himself. He was fully immersing himself into the role.
We never rehearsed the character. We never talked really specifically about what he would do. All we really talked about was script and story and character, but we never talked about how are you gonna do it, you know what I mean? I think his process is one of surprise for himself.
We were working spontaneously, which was just the flavor of this movie and what made the most sense for it. It was something that you really couldn't figure everything out in advance. We had to find it in the moment, and so you need a director that thinks that way.
There were all these changes sort of that kept happening as we were filming and as they were sort of discovering the story and seeing what they had and seeing, oh, the story can move in this direction or that direction. And before we would shoot on a day, me and Joaquin and Scott and Todd would meet up in Todd's trailer and sort of rewrite scenes together, and then we'd have it printed out, and that's what we'd be doing that night. And I've never really worked with somebody who is so open to shifting as the story needs it.
Well, Todd, first of all, is viciously smart. And his willingness to just go outside of any boundary to tell the story that he wants to tell. It's very hard to put him in a box. I mean, the first thing he did was a documentary about G.G. Allen. And I think once you become notable as a comedic director, a lot of people definitely see you as just that. But I've always known that he's an auteur.
There's so much that comes up on a comedy that is spur of the moment, whether it's improvisation or just, it'd be really funny if we do this, and you just sort of throw a wrench in the whole thing and you do it because you're servicing the joke. Well, working with Joaquin wasn't all that different. and you needed to be facile.
Todd would come up with these great lines spontaneously, and I would usually doubt them and make him feel bad and say that he's wrong and it's a bad idea. And then I would try it. I'd go like, that was a really great line. And he consistently did that. He's also really good at identifying kind of rhythmically things that weren't working in the scene and would come up with really great solutions to them in the moment.
We had scripted a scene where Arthur runs into the bathroom and he has to get rid of this gun that he had been given that was now evidence. And so he pulls the grate off the bathroom wall and he hides his gun in there. And then he kind of washes his face, the makeup off his face and all this stuff. And when we got in the bathroom that day, it was just me and Joaquin, and we're standing there, we're kind of, well, should we put it in this grate? And we just started talking about, does Arthur really care about evidence? And does Arthur really care about, does he even know enough? Like, what did he see this in a movie? Like, hide a gun? Like, why is it even in his language to do that? And then we're like, yeah, let's not do that. Oh, okay, well, what should we do?
That scene was the second or third week or something like that. It was very early on. And for me, it was really a defining moment, both for the character, but also for me and Todd's dynamic of working together. It was originally envisioned a different way, and we talked about kind of the possibilities, and we couldn't really land on anything. It was really hard to identify what it was that we were after. And Todd was great. He said, let's just go onto the set, just alone, just you and me, and let's talk it through. And it really seemed like it was a moment that had to be about the emergence of Joker.
We were literally in there for an hour, and we were at a standstill. We hadn't really figured it out.
And I said, it almost seems like it's a dance, but not big movement, not a happy dance, but some kind of movement. I don't know what it is.
And I said, I got this great piece of music I want to play you from the composer. I think it's great, and I've just been listening to it all night. She sent it to me yesterday, and so I played it for him. And he loved it, and he just started doing this dance to it.
It's this beautiful, kind of mournful cello piece, and he said, "Oh, maybe I would just start on your foot." And so then we just said, "Okay, we didn't talk about it more than that." We said, "Let's just set it up and shoot it."
And I think it's a really great moment in the movie, and it's a really much more effective way of illustrating the beginning of a transformation, with grace that kind of comes out of nowhere. You kind of feel that he has it in him. You know, we wrote in the script there's a certain elegance to him and a certain romance in him when he holds the door for the woman and puts his foot out with a little bit of flair. The way he dances in the beginning of the film as a clown, he has it in him. There's music in him, so to speak. But that's the first time we really see it come out.
Part of finding those moments, I have to say that I worked with this choreographer named Michael Arnold for a couple sequences, and he'd introduced me to a lot of idea about movement and dance. In particular, one clip that he showed me, which was Roy Bolger, and it's a song called The Old Soft Shoe. And for some reason, it encapsulated for me, like Joker trying to kind of come out, trying to emerge.
Joaquin's the most nimble actor I've ever worked with. He just doesn't get stuck in anything.
It's kind of otherworldly. It's unlike any other performance I've ever seen. He's so in his character from the get-go, and he's filled with wonderfully inspiring ideas.
You get an actor like that, you know you're gonna have a plethora of takes and points of view and ways to go and modulations. And then it's just about honing that, musically in the edit. It was so much fun to work on the edit of his stuff. It's what you wish for as a director.
We've been editing this movie for so long because there's 18 trillion versions of this movie just based on the way he would do things so differently every time. You would come over to him and give him one line of direction and it would literally change everything in a great way. And he was just never locked into one thing.
It seemed like it was the only way to do it. Because you have a character that's so erratic, and he's not really certain of what he's gonna do. And so it felt most true and most exciting and dangerous when we didn't really know what was gonna happen.
Hey, Arthur, I heard what happened. Sorry, mate, there's a scene we had in the dressing room where, you know, he's just been fired and he's meant to be leaving. And one time he decided to come back in and punch the clock, literally.
I forgot to punch out.
And smashed it off the wall, and we're all just kind of like, wow.
I think a lot of the movie works because there's tension. Really, you feel it with everything that Joaquin does in the movie.
I think this was hard for him. He really kind of went into the character, and it was fascinating to watch. Someone really embodied the absorption of a new identity.
Hey.
There's many ways to look at the movie. He might not be Joker. This is just a version of a Joker origin. It's the version this guy is telling in this room at a mental institution. I don't know that he's the most reliable narrator in the world. You know what I'm saying?
You take, you know, Todd and Scott and pieces of me and Katharine Hepburn and Frankenfurter, and you put it all together, and that's our Joker. And I don't think that any of us really knew that that was going to be the ingredients for it, but that's just what happened.